The world desperately needs your greatness. So if you know yourself, you can own yourself at a different level. And when you own yourself at a different level, you know how to put yourself in extraordinarily right positions. People who accomplish extraordinary things, they're people who put themselves in extraordinarily right positions where their extraordinary talent met extraordinary opportunity, met extraordinary timing. And all of that, to some extent, can be predicted and created if you know what you're looking for. It doesn't happen easily and doesn't necessarily happen overnight, but it can be created.
Welcome my guest, Mike Zeller. He is known as a top entrepreneur, mentor, and business architect. Mike's businesses have done over $300 million in sales, and that he himself has founded and partnered with over 20 ventures across multiple industries, such as technology, real estate, fashion, digital marketing, and high-level entrepreneur masterminds and coaching. He is also the author of the newest book, The Genius Within: Find Your Natural Pathway to Impact, Fulfillment, and Prosperity. His incredible genius lies with his innate ability to help his clients pinpoint their deepest purposes, greatest gifts, and highest potential to serve and influence the world. He has been featured on Business Insider, Forbes, Fox Radio, and has spent over 1,447 hours with Tony Robbins. Mike Zeller, I am so happy to have you on. Like I was mentioning, I was introduced to you by Amberly Lago, which is a great friend of mine, and anybody she recommends, I 100% say yes to, because I know she knows good people and good people connect with other good people. So I'm so happy to have you on. Thank you for being here.
Erica, honored to be here. You're an absolute gem and can't wait to dive in.
Thank you. Well, I've learned a lot about you in the past week, and I love there's so many different layers of you. I could tell you're big into personal development. You've spent a lot of your life diving really deep into your own personal development and leadership skills. And of course, being certified in NLP and leadership, master leader. So I'm really happy to, I would love to go a little deep into that, because I know you're a big Tony Robbins fan, and so am I. And I would love to hear I didn't expect to start this way, but I would love to hear, how did you get so involved in your own development and interest into better yourself and pursue Tony Robbins and do all the hours you have done?
Man, great question, Erica. I really, I went to my first seminar at age 19, right before, it was actually in the middle of my freshman year of college. And I was like lit up. I learned more in that. It was a Peter Lowe success seminar. And I was like, man, I learned more than I learned all semester long in that one day. And it resonated. I didn't know at the time, but it was like a clue about what I was made to do. And then in my mid-20s, a friend of mine gave me the Get the Edge series by Tony Robbins. And another friend gave me Personal Hour 2 and said, Mike, you'd really love this. And I started listening to him, and it just, man, it set me on fire in a whole different way. And Tony's just the best in the world. And I've been to 14 Tony Robbins events, spent 1,447 hours with him and over $200,000 with him. And he empowers you to believe in yourself and to step up and claim your greatness in a way no one else does. And I now am inspired to do that in my own small way. Or not a small way anymore, but a little way.
Yeah. Being humble. But what would you say has been the biggest takeaway you learned from Tony Robbins? I know that's a really loaded question because there's probably so much, but if you were to name, or if you were to say 3 things that really impacted you in your life.
Yeah. First, you get what you tolerate in life. So whatever you allow into your life, that's just a sign that you're tolerating that. If you put up boundaries and hardcore, hey, I'm not accepting this anymore, from yourself, from others, from your circumstances, then things shift, right? And then second, proximity creates power. Like I loved, he talked about that for his platinum partnership program. And I found it to be so true. That's why I lead high level masterminds now, because I'm creating this high level group of amazing people that are growing and learning and shifting. And I'm in them as well. I grow and shift, and us connecting, right? Like there's things we're going to learn from each other. So proximity is power. And then the third thing would be, you can change your state at any point, which changes what you focus on, which changes how you show up. If you're in a depressed down cycle, then if you start moving more confidently and and I'm not making light of mental health. My wife battles mental depression and attempted suicide twice as a kid. But if you control your state and you can just start moving differently, get a work, like sometimes last night I didn't feel like working out. I went and worked out and my state just elevated. It's like I'm shaking off the dust. And then the last thing, this is combo of all of them. But I like to ask people, what if we became environmental designers of our life? And so I just started designing out my life. Tony doesn't say this, but I'm combining some of the things. It's my own thing. But if I design the people I'm around, the thoughts that come into my mind, the foods that I eat, the roles or responsibilities that I accept, what I get paid, if I do all these things and do it intentionally, guess what? I'm designing out my whole future. And if I design my environment so that success is inevitable for me, it's like gravity pulling me up, and it's possible for all of us.
Ah, I love that. And I think it's so, so true. And that's what's so empowering is that really, if we think of it like, let's wipe the canvas, like let's say 2020 was exactly that. Let's wipe the canvas. And if I were to create the masterpiece that I wish for my life, what would it include? It would have this relationship, this, I'd read these type of books, I would do this and this, and you literally can design your life. I love that. And I think you mentioned some of the things that I think is so profound, that so simplistic but so profound, that he teaches that you could change your state in any moment. It's so true. It's hard when you're in the mud, it's hard to do it, but the thing is we all have the ability to do that. So I love that. So let's talk about your story, or let's talk about your journey. I know you're a very successful entrepreneur. You have your hands in so many different things. So I would love to know, I'm going to introduce you, or I introduced you in this podcast separately, but I would like to hear personally, how do you describe yourself in what you do, and how did you get started in your entrepreneurship journey?
Yeah. I introduced myself as a business architect and/or America's top expert at helping high achievers find their deepest zone of genius. And it just depends on I mainly play in two categories, and I love both. So what's a business architect? It's like, imagine you're going to build your dream home. Budget is not a restriction. What are you going to do? You're going to dream out, hey, how are we going to live in this environment? How's this going to shape our world, my family's world? What's this going to reflect about me, right? And my values and my vision and our life quality. And so you start dreaming and designing out what you want to live in based on who you are. So when I think about designing out businesses, I'm working, one of my other clients, he's a film executive. He owns a top film studio, and he's the CEO and co-founder. And but he was getting burned out, even though they had a record year. And he's like, Mike, hey, I'm depressed now. I hate my work. I'm unfulfilled. And it was because he was playing out of position. He had fallen into the trap of trying to be someone else's model of what a CEO does. And so we started redesigning that whole thing. And literally the next week, more life, more fulfillment. It stripped out almost 80% of what brought him death. And his surge of energy and creativity. He no longer needs to take depression medicine, a few weeks later, because he's in a whole different headspace, and he's doing what he's meant to do, and when he's gifted at what brings him life. So we can design out our businesses to be much more aligned, much more profitable, and much more fun if we know our deepest zones of genius. And then the second thing well, that ties into the second thing, which is helping high achievers find their zone of genius. So I love mentoring high level people that are going after it in life.
Amazing. And how did you get started in your entrepreneurship journey? Take us
Oh
a little
yeah.
back.
Yeah. Really, I had a no money down, cash flow. It was like a Carlton Sheets real estate program that I bought, that a friend of mine, one of my mentors, bought, and I started investing in real estate, and loved it for the season. But then I also realized within a few years I was really bored with it, and I knew I was meant for something more. And if that's all I did with my life, my soul would die. And so that was my first self-employed venture, was selling real estate, investing in real estate. And then I started diving into creating other businesses. I went on a mini sabbatical to Buenos Aires, Argentina, inspired by a 4-hour work week. And I'm down there learning tango, learning Spanish, all those things. And I come back and start 3 new businesses the next year, because that was, I just had ideas, and I was like, I got to try these things out. And I was making great money in my real estate business, so I could afford to invest in a few other things. And I found a lot of joy and fulfillment in that. And then 3-4 more years later, I was in Tony's program, and I just started expanding my businesses. At that point, we're doing like 30 million a year. And I was like, I had more people asking for mentorship. And so I started at carving out space, but it was like the 7th priority, to mentor and coach. And then I was like, this brings me the most life, and I need to make it number 1, but I had to strip away and get rid of the other businesses over time.
Oh, wow. So when you joined Tony Robbins Platinum program, were you already pretty successful and that took you to the next level, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, most people would have considered me, I'm pretty successful, but us as high achievers, we're always like, I don't feel successful yet.
Right. Right.
Right. Like there's so much more I wanted to create and do. Yeah, but definitely, but it did. My business, my net worth doubled the next year. And I've seen that happen in my clients' lives and other people's lives as they put themselves in the right environments. Doesn't always happen overnight, but yeah, I grew a ton through that. And because I was in a whole different, my peer group radically changed, my
Right.
environment radically changed, my identity radically changed. And so we act according to our identity. Jesus said a good tree cannot produce bad fruit. A bad tree cannot produce good fruit. That's an identity issue. So we're a product of our identity. So if you can rewire your identity at any point in life, which you probably help your clients do as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I saw actually on your website, somebody quoted that you're the most famous entrepreneur you've never heard of. And I would assume because you're the one behind the scenes that is helping entrepreneurs take themselves to the next level. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's it. That's part of it. Yeah. I mean, I just love, and I'm comfortable in the limelight much more so than I used to be, but I'm really comfortable designing and ideating out business ventures. So that's where I flourish the
What would
most.
you say is some of your biggest accomplishments in some of the businesses you've been involved in? Can you
So we
drop
had
some names?
yeah, we had some well, a couple things. We had a socially minded car dealership, think CarMax meets Tom Shoes. And during that season, man, we had literally, I think we had given over 31 cars, over $300,000 in whatchamacallit, in value to cars to people in need. And I loved that. And it was so fulfilling to see people that never would have owned a car. Many of them didn't even have a driver's license, single moms that never thought it was possible because they just grew up in certain levels of poverty that you and I couldn't even imagine. And so that was something really meaningful. Secondly, Second biggest accomplishment, I would say, I mean, writing my first book that's a freaking feat. I don't know if you've written a book yet. It's a
It's
beast to get
coming.
your first one done.
Yeah, it's like birthing a baby, even though yes, of course, it's not you literally birthing a baby, but it is a big task. And I know every author can absolutely agree with that. So let's go into your book. So the book, it's actually coming out. Well, the episode will be out when this comes out, or sorry, the book will be out when this episode comes out, but it's called Genius Within.
Mhm.
And what's the full title? Your natural pathway to impact, fulfillment,
Impact.
and wealth.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And
Awesome.
so it came out of this process of mentoring entrepreneurs, and most every entrepreneur asking to some extent, hey, what's my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? What's my path? And so I created it to help. I was like, oh, there's clues. One personality test gives you this clue. Another personality test gives you that clue. Well, you can't just do your personality test. What about your values? Can't do just your values and your personality test. What about your passions? What about your relationships? Are there clues in your relationships? You know, who you naturally want to hang out with. And then the fourth area is your defining life moments. Those moments where, oh man, you're like, wow, I'm made for this, or no, I'm definitely not made for this. So, so I had some of those moments, and the combination of all of that is what I consider the greatest accumulation of clues about who on earth you are and what on earth you're meant to do.
Amazing. Okay. So the first one you talked about personality tests. I know that that was one thing that you've expressed that you've taken a lot of personality tests. So what are some of the personality tests that you include in either your book? I know you also have a course. I don't know, is the course available now as well?
Yeah, it is. Yep.
So the Genius Within course, and then the book is going to be available as well. Of course, that will be in the show notes. So as far as personality tests, what are some of the personality tests that you recommend are really powerful to gather information on who we are?
My favorites are, I love the wealth dynamics test. It's the only test that shows you your natural pathway for building wealth. You get about a 35-page report on yourself. It's so good. I've had clients, like one of my clients, she's a former CEO of a government agency with like 80,000 employees. She said, Mike, she did a one-day session with me. She's like, Mike, that test gave me one of the biggest breakthroughs in my 34-year career when she read the results. And we hadn't even started. I was like, hey, we're already done.
That's amazing.
No, I was just joking. But that test is phenomenal. The Colby Index, which measures your propensity to start things fast or slow, how much detail or fact finding you need, your propensity to follow through or not follow through. So if you're like a high on the quick start, which means you love to start things, you're probably low on the follow through, which means you don't like to finish things. So then it tells you, oh, I need to hire people that are freaking phenomenal at the follow through, because I suck at the follow through. Or Strengths Finder, I love that one. You know, your top 5 strengths, and then Disc Profile is also great, as well as Myers-Briggs. But I use them all. Enneagram also is wonderful.
Have you heard of the Sparketype test by chance?
No.
Okay, so Jonathan Fields, the podcast host of Good Life Project, he just came out with his book, Sparked, and he developed this test called Sparketype, and it's a great as well. It's coming out on the podcast as well, but another type of personality test that determines what you're made to do and come alive and work. And I thought it was really spectacular what was gained out of that. And again, I think as you mentioned, I think I've heard you mention this, that all these personality tests tell you something, but we forget it. And so having all of them together and then able to look at it in a broader stroke, I think that's when we could actually look at all of them and add it up and see where it goes and where that takes us, or figuring it more out, at least you could say. Yeah. I think that obviously then one of the number one questions people have is like, what do I do for life, work, and purpose and passion? Like, so how do you help people figure out what they are passionate about? Like, what would be like reverse engineering the best process to figure that out?
So I have in my actual worksheet, I say, all right, passions, where do you get excited and have a natural interest, joy, or curiosity? Okay, and you just timeline back your life. Like sometimes I have clients, one of my clients right now, she's She's a former travel executive, retired from that last year, and now is starting her own thing. Well, she neglected her art and her creative endeavors, and now she's stepping into that and making these beautiful, unique wine bottles out of that are very artistic, repurposing, and that ties into her passion for sustainability. Like she, wants to make the environment and the world better, and then she uses her artistic gifts that she basically neglected for 30 years plus, for the most part. And then another thing you ask is, hey, what is not a passion? Sometimes it's easier for us to start what is not a passion, something that robs you of energy. For example, if I have to do tedious financial analysis, I suck at that. But other people, that's their passion. They've chosen their career to work for the IRS, to get a CPA job, whatever it is. That is their career and they love it. But they couldn't dream if you set them and said, hey, try and start this, they'd want to take a gun to their head. I have people that I work with as clients that are like, man, they are phenomenal managing and developing and improving something that's already running. But to start something from the ground up is like, you might as well be plucking the nostrils of a camel, because it's not, they're not going to do it, and it's not going to be pleasant.
What are your biggest strengths?
My biggest strengths are, I think I'm without a doubt one of the best at galvanizing momentum. When people, that's why I do my coaching packages. If I'm doing one-on-one, for example, it's for 90 days, because we're going to do more in 90 days than most people will do in 6 months or a year. And I'm like, then we're moved forward. Maybe we do a second round, but hey, we've cranked through. I charge what most people charge in the higher ticket side in 6 months. I charge that for 90 days because we're going to create momentum really fast. So ideation is another strength. So, and then connecting the dots. So if I look at all the different things, I'll show you a couple of things, since we can, I mind map. Do you ever mind map?
You know what, I have not actually, but I know that it's a very useful tool, and I don't know why I haven't done it yet, because it's actually great for a podcaster, I know.
Yeah, and what's cool about it, all right, if you think it's some of the world's greatest geniuses, one of the guys I've studied reasonably a lot is Leonardo da Vinci. Look at all his old notebooks. Yeah, he's got drawings of helicopters and airplanes and parachutes and bicycles 500 years before any of those were created. But he also has tons of mind maps. Mind maps allow you to organize and synthesize your ideas. And if you're an idea generator, like, ideas are bountiful for me. I've got whole businesses, I've got movies, I've got books, all mind mapped out, relationships, marketing plans. So I can do that in my sleep, and it's fun. Another clue is what is just fun and easy for you that is really hard for someone else. Most of us don't value what is fun and easy for us, but that's often our $10,000 an hour activity. So relationally, like going deep, designing out marketing plans and funnels and offers, that's an architecting side, tying the dots. I love all that stuff. I don't like to build it, but I'm one of the best strategic thinkers you will find. And if you look at the Strengths Finder, I tie all those things together. I'm super high in the strategic thinking quadrants.
That's amazing. So which is a website you think to go, or is best to go to for mind mapping, if there's a website specifically?
There's two tools I really like the most. One is called Simple Mind Pro, and that's like $40 for a lifetime. Another one is called Miro, MIRO.com, and that's $15 a month. But both are great and and there's another one called MindMeister that's pretty good too.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And okay, so you mentioned environment, and I know before we press record, you were talking about that you stay in one place for about a month at a time, that you travel other areas. And I'm curious, is that so you're in a different environment, so that stimulates new ideas? Is that how it works for you?
Yeah, so I made it a goal, and my wife fortunately supports me in this goal and likes it too, but to live in one of the world's 50 most beautiful cities every year for at least a month.
That's amazing.
And the reason is, man, guess what? our world is turned upside down. Adventure, it interrupts patterns and rhythms. So imagine every year we're getting a little bit of a pattern interrupt. We're getting catapulted into new environments, new experiences, new restaurants. And you think as a kid, man, I have a 3-month-old daughter, but like a little kid, 4 years old, you're in awe of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, or roly polies. They're so fascinating, or this type of fish or that type of fish, whatever. Well, if I can create awe and wonder and exploration and adventure every year till I'm dead,
Amazing.
how's that going to affect my business? How's that going to affect my marriage? Like, think of all these great couples. Bill and Melinda Gates getting divorced last year, or talking about it, at least. Maybe they're back together. Hopefully they are. My own marriage, like, man, we had bumps that we wouldn't normally have because we're stuck in a freaking one place, not seeing the world more. And even though we went to Europe for 2 months during the pandemic last year,
Uh-huh.
but it was still, when we weren't in Europe, man, we were stuck in our place in Nashville for the most part. And I'm like, just, it's hard. We're meant to see the world, and the whole earth is our playground, is my philosophy.
I love it. I think travel is so transformative. I think that's the best way we could grow, especially for kids, to experience different places and see the world and see different cultures. I think is so valuable. So if somebody is not able to do as you are doing, which sounds absolutely amazing, and I would so be on board with that. If somebody doesn't have the capability to move places and stay somewhere for a month, how could they do that in their own area? How could they create this different environment? What would you suggest?
Figure out some rhythms that work for you, whether um one of my ideal rhythms is to be, I take one day off a week, one full day off, not working, not checking emails, any of that. And then one weekend a month is ideally an adventure spot where I travel outside. And you can go on drives, you can, drive, fly, whatever. Then one for me, I love to be out of the country 1 week a quarter at least. Last couple of years that hasn't happened as much. Happened last year a bit, but and then if you look, just find what is your discomfort zone. We've got our 3 zones: comfort zone, discomfort zone, and paralysis zone. Paralysis zone is where you stretch too far and you're going to melt and you're going to break down. Discomfort zone is it feels uncomfortable. I dare everyone to live in the discomfort, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And with that travel side, like adventure, stimulation, creativity, spiritual, energetic renewal, all that happens when you put yourself in new environments, new people, and you can do it affordably. Like, 1 year we went to Barcelona and we rented out our house in Nashville for a month. So that paid for our lodging in Barcelona.
That's so smart. Yeah, absolutely. And also talking about environment, you, as you mentioned, have been in masterminds, you lead masterminds. Do you recommend everybody gets in a mastermind, or if it's not for everybody, who is it for?
Um, I don't see how it's not for everybody at some capacity. Some people might be better suited for like a smaller mastermind. But man, if it, again, going back to, hey, what if I design my environment so my success as I define it is inevitable? I think it's possible for all of us. If I consistently put myself in inspiring, expansive environments with inspiring and expansive people, I'm naturally going to follow suit. My world is going to continue to expand. My life is going to continue to expand. So that's why I think it's possible and necessary for anyone that's high growth. Put yourself, or create one locally, have one locally. But chances are, if you're a really high achiever, you're not going to get what you need just from people locally. You're going to need to go bigger and go more national.
How long have you had your mastermind, your high level mastermind?
I've had different iterations of a high level mastermind for like 5 or 6 years now.
Okay.
And I've pivoted and adapted it differently and gotten more locked in now. Initially it was just It was broader, and now it's more, I have two main groups: e-commerce, founders mastery with my buddy Colin Wayne, and then Symposia, which is for what I call the successful thought leader. So
amazing. Love it. Okay. So knowing those 4 components of your zone of genius, how do you archetype then your business around your zone of genius once you go through the process?
So the process will actually give you the clues, and then you look, hey, what's on my list of responsibilities that are in my weaknesses or in my death list, of the things that bring me life versus things that bring me death. And I start moving, what's the easiest thing for me to move off my plate? Sometimes that might be moving a VA to handle administrative stuff. Like, I don't set up a lot of my calendar stuff. So I have 2 people, my VA that handles our acuity scheduling, then my EA handles a lot of the more complicated bookings. So that's an easy thing off your plate. Repetitive stuff, like I don't do the quotes in my social media because I love them, but I would never be consistent.
Yeah.
It's not my
tedious.
thing.
Yeah.
So what's in the $10 an hour wheelhouse, or the lowest value activity, not lowest value, lowest, easiest for me to delegate and move off my plate with the least cost. And then you move up, what's the $100 an hour activity that I need to delegate and move off my plate, or $30 or whatever. And then that frees you up. If you know your $1,000 or $10,000 an hour activity, now you just, one more $1,000 an hour activity per week, I just improved my pay, and now I can also delegate more stuff that's not in my wheelhouse. So
would you say what would you say is the first hire to create more momentum and also obviously use your time wisely? Would you say it's a VA? And then or what would you say it should be, and how should we go about finding that person?
Probably 80% of entrepreneurs. Well, I think you look at, what is my hot button consuming activity that takes a lot of time and a lot of energy and that brings me death. And then underneath that, there might be 2 or 3 things that jump, but more often than not, I'd say 75% of entrepreneurs, it's a VA or EA, executive assistant. And then, because we're great at visionary starting things, but we suck at the finishing and the administrative, and that frees your mental load so much when you move some of those things off your plate. But that's usually where it starts.
Where would you say the best place to find a VA?
For me, I've found mine currently through Upwork, or actually LinkedIn. Upwork is good. Onlinejobs.ph, which is Philippines, is good, depending on the skill level you need. But I've found a lot of good team members on Upwork. So I have graphic designers that I've hired that are basically work for me almost full time, but they're overseas. So I pay them like equivalent of 10 to 15 bucks an hour, which is a good rate for them in their country because their cost of living is lower. But I would pay the same person in the US $80 an hour.
Of course. Yeah. And so why do you think people generally get stuck at a glass ceiling? Like, what is the common thing you see that people that get entrepreneurs stuck at that glass ceiling?
Identity. Identity. One of my favorite sayings I came up with this year was that your identity precedes your destiny. Right now, I'm studying. Let me grab this book here. I'm pulling up Muhammad Ali's. This is my second book I'm going to read about Muhammad Ali.
It's a big one.
It is a big one. I like reading big biographies sometimes, but it'll be the second one I read this year of him. And at the age 12, actually gets his bike stolen at a fair. He goes in, and we go back to zones of genius and key life experiences, those defining life moments. Muhammad Ali is frustrated, black kid, Louisville, Kentucky in the 1950s, gets his bike stolen, goes in, complains to the police, and he's just gotten this new, nice bike from his parents for a birthday or whatever. And the police officer says, son, we'll see if we can find your bike for you, but it looks like you got some anger, you got some frustration right now.
Mm.
Would you like to take that out? And mom had said, or Cassius Clay at the time says, yeah, I would. He's like, well, I own a boxing arena. Why don't you come down tomorrow and let's train you up on some boxing, work out some of that anger. Goes down, starts boxing that week. And then at age 12, he has his first boxing match. He wins his first boxing match, barely. But what's he do? He starts prancing around the arena. I am the greatest. I am the greatest. I am the greatest. Then, actually, one of the cool stories, at age 6 months old, his mom likes to joke, she was his first knockout because he swung his hand at her face and knocked out a tooth.
Oh my goodness. Wow, that's strong for a baby. What?
So clues.
How hilarious, huh?
Right.
Wow.
And then let's go back. All right. So in the 1964. All right. So 1964, he's about to face Sonny Liston, who, if you Google him, he'll still show up as one of the top 10 boxers of all time. Sonny Liston's heavy favorite. Muhammad had won his last two matches, or Cassius Clay at the time had won his last two matches kind of barely. He was like 7-1 odds. Sonny Liston's going to win. Long story short, Sonny was also backed by the mafia because mafia controlled boxing back then. And anyways, Muhammad said, or Cassius says, you know what? I'm going to write a poem. And he writes this poem. You can look it up on YouTube. And it says, I am the greatest. It was one of his best poems. And he speaks this poem out into a live audience. Guess what? People start laughing at the beginning. They start jeering. It's almost like if they had tomatoes, they would be throwing tomatoes at him. They start laughing and taunting him. But then he says it and he keeps going with enough conviction, enough passion. By the end of the recitation of the poem, the crowd is clapping and enthused because his conviction had translated. Then he beats Sonny Liston, becomes the world heavyweight champion of the world, and he changes his name 2 weeks later to Muhammad Ali from Cassius Clay because he's like, I'm no longer a slave. I'm not holding, Cassius Clay was a slave name.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, hey, I'm Muhammad Ali. And he was also in the Muslim faith at the time, right? So anyway, our identity precedes our destiny. And we speak it over our life all the time, what we're becoming, how we're showing up. And I think there's clues about, where you're a badass and where you suck ass. And if you get anchored to the clues about where you're a badass and you learn to embrace those things as truth. One of the other things I love to say right now, it's like, I wonder, you ever struggle with imposter syndrome? I think some of your listeners
does,
might.
right? Yeah.
Everybody does, right?
Yeah.
Me too, right?
Yeah.
Well, what if the real imposter is not that invisible person you think you're meant to be? But what if the real imposter is your current reality? What if I'm meant to be, that is me at my highest and my truest level, but my current reality is the fake? That I'm playing small. I'm showing up in a shadow of myself. So that's one flip that I've been thinking through. It's like, hey,
it's a good thing to think about, actually. I think a lot of people let that hit. That's good. I like that. So what got you into reading autobiographies? Because I know this of Tony Robbins, he would speak that a lot, that he would read a lot of autobiographies. So I'm curious, is that what got you intrigued to read up on other people's lives, or what was the interest there?
Well, I don't know what really hit me initially with it, but someone said, hey, it's a good idea to read autobiographies because then you learn the stories. And I can tell you, in our darkest moments, when I went through a season where I lost over $1 million, what pulled me through was knowing the stories of other people. I knew, Walt Disney went bankrupt. Henry Ford was bankrupt at age 43. Elon Musk made $300 million in PayPal and then had to borrow money to pay for rent. And Tesla and SpaceX were on the verge of going bankrupt. And Steve Jobs was kicked out of his own company for 10 years and all of these things. Or then people that I knew personally, like that had been through massive struggle, but that struggle set them up for a whole new path. Amberly's story, right? She's got 34 surgeries, and so those stories we're story creatures. We remember stories. Stories activate a whole different part of our brain. And so if I have been anchored into the stories of Rockefeller and George Washington and Frederick Douglass and Muhammad Ali and Hank Aaron and whoever else, Warren Buffett. I've read so many biographies. I read probably 2 or 3 biographies a year. They're usually longer books, so it takes me a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But man, now I'm just infused with stories. I can overcome almost anything, or I can see possibility for anything.
That's amazing. I love that. So if you were to share one of your stories of struggle and how you've overcome that on the flip side, can you share something with us? I know you mentioned the losing $1 million, but let's say, is there something else that you would like to share with us that has really been a pivotal, eye-opening experience for you?
Early, I'd say my wife and I were dating. We were 3 months into our dating, and she's very different than me. Very, very different. Like, she's the artsy feeler, very emotive, all these things. And I was like, hey, I knew something special was with her. We had something special in our first date. She did as well. And I was like, man, she's very different. And we had some frustrations. And I was like, all right. We weren't even officially exclusive at the time, I don't think, but I was like, babe, let's do a zone of genius date. And I had her I said, here's the idea. It's like, what if we could know and appreciate each other, the mystery of each other, and know how we're wired and understand that. And then we can enjoy it instead of get frustrated by it. Because you're very different than me and I'm very different than you. So I had her do, we each did these 4 different personality tests. I didn't have wealth dynamics at the time, I don't think. Maybe I did, I can't remember. But anyway, she called her sister that night and talked to her mom and hey, this guy that I'm dating wants me to take all these personality tests. And it's kind of weird, but I really like him, so I guess I'll do it. So we do this date, this 3-hour date of where we're reading each other's profiles. Wow. And talking about it and having fun with it. And what happened is, now to this day, 6 years later, we still flirt, we still laugh, we still tease around our geniuses. Yes, we still get frustrated by our proclivities. Like, for example, I'm an INTP, and on the Myers-Briggs, there's 16 personalities. She is an ENFJ. ENFJs are incredibly forgetful. They forget. And so I know in my mind, if I share something with her, I'm going to have to remind her of it probably 2 or 3 times. And I can handle that because I know that's part of her personality, not that she doesn't care. And then I'm an INTP, which means I am the least communicative of types. I'm also the world's greatest problem solver, but I'm the least communicative of personality types. And it literally says in the descriptions that I will have told her something, and because I thought it, but I didn't actually tell her. And so she'll be frustrated because babe, I got this thing, I'm doing this thing. And I will think, oh, she's an ENFJ, she just forgot. And she's thinking, no, you didn't tell me, because you actually think that you tell me lots of stuff, but you don't actually tell me, because you have this conversation in your head.
Yeah. It's so good to know. So I haven't taken many of those tests, to be honest. I've taken the Enneagram. I can't even remember what I am. Speaking of putting them all together so you could actually view it together. What else? I recently took human design because I had that on my podcast. Have you ever done human design? Yeah. What else? But I haven't. And then, knowing even the simplest thing is the 5 love languages. How much does that tell you about your partner or your friends? That's eye-opening in general. So I love that story that it helps you understand your partner at a whole different level. It's great. I love it.
Oh, and it helped. All right, I'm the least empathetic of types. I have to learn empathy, and I have to logically understand empathy to actually express empathy. So she got on the groups on the INTPs and oh, this is the only personality type that there's support groups for the spouses of INTPs, because we're so unempathetic.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And if we didn't understand that, she would be frustrated and think I'm a total ass. Sometimes she still
Absolutely.
thinks I'm a total ass, but she remembers that I'm actually very kind most of the time and very thoughtful, but I can be a total ass because I don't lead with empathy.
That helps
That's
us not judge other people
yeah,
by just
exactly.
understanding and comprehending that there are personality types. Like this is a real, it's like, I don't know if it's scientifical proven. I think a lot of these are scientific proven,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, yeah, once we understand it, we could at least have a little bit more compassion that it's okay that people are different. They don't have to be like us, and we don't have to, they don't need to operate like us,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
So how about other books that you've read that you think are just game-changing books that you've read in your life? It could be either for life or entrepreneurship. What would be some of those? Maybe drop some, like 3.
4 Hour Work Week, of course. That was phenomenal. I've read that 3.5, 4 times. Another one that is not talked about as often, Power of Full Engagement. And
I've
it's about
never
the
heard of.
secrets of energy management. How energy management is more important than time management in the 4 quadrants: emotional, physical, spiritual, and mental. Because if you are burned out, you're energetically depleted, you can't do much. Doesn't matter if you manage your time well, but if you are just locked in and you're in the zone, you can do more in 1 hour than you might do the rest of the week in terms of value. So
Yeah,
it's like, how do I get, for me,
it's like that flow state.
I want to be an absolute master of peak performance and high energy and get a lot done. Like my time management is pretty dialed in, as well as my energy management, so I can stay locked in and I can go strong as long as I need to during the day, most days, because my energy management, I have rhythms. Think we're polar bears. If they're on display 7 days a week, you know what happens to them at the zoo?
Mm.
Their coat starts turning yellow
Why?
because they are violating nature.
Huh.
But if you tried to say, oh, all right, hey, Cincinnati, we're not going to have winter this year, you're violating nature. You're
Mm.
violating the rhythms. Why the whole earth is made out of rhythms. Direct current versus alternating current. Tesla and Edison were at each other. Edison's like, it's direct current, straight line, consistent all the way. Tesla's like, nope, it's alternating current. It's waves up and down, up
Mm.
and down, up and down. Who won? Alternating current, because it's the way the universe is wired. All of the world. And that's why sometimes as entrepreneurs, we're like, I don't want it to be a roller coaster anymore. Well,
It's just gonna be.
yeah, go sleep
Welcome
in the
to.
grave.
Yeah, yeah. What would be another book? One more.
Oh yeah. I mean, for building an expert brand, Russell Brunson's Expert Secrets is really good for the marketing side. I mean, there's so many books. What Science of Getting Rich, I've read about 5 or 6 times, as well as You Are a Badass at Making Money. Think and Grow Rich is terrific. Um, there's, you know what, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho is right up there. And then Titan about John Rockefeller's biography, so freaking good. That Ron Chernow guy. Also Agony and the Ecstasy about Michelangelo. Irving Stone was a great biographical fiction writer and transported into story and inspiration. Man, that one was right up there.
That's
Sorry, I
awesome.
just rattled off.
Great Yeah, that's awesome. And then you studied NLP and master in leadership. What were the programs you took? Because if somebody is interested in, developing those extra skills, because if somebody wants to become as successful as you, obviously we need to know the tools, how you got there.
Yeah, NLP is great. I did the global NLP with that's the company. I got a master practitioner NLP program, which is their higher level, 16-day program. I loved it. It helped me understand how to guide and dictate my own mind. And it's actually been invaluable for working with clients or even in my marriage. Like there's moments my wife who's battled mental health issues, like we were meeting her birth father for the first time
Mm.
since she was a year and a half, 2 years ago. On the way there, she starts a mild panic attack in the car. I'm like driving 80 miles an hour down in SoCal, down the highway, and I have to lead her through an NLP exercise to do a pattern interrupt and get her
Oh, that's great.
in a relaxed state. And 20 minutes later, she's asleep. She went from panic attack to being asleep.
That's amazing.
And so global NLP. There's also NLP, The New Science of Achievement. That's a good book if you just want a book around NLP processes, which is really good.
Awesome. And so the difference between, so obviously I want people to grab your book, but if they wanted to do maybe a deeper dive, would you say your course is a deeper dive into what's in the book?
Yeah, the course is great. The book is spot on. I think for the most complete guide. And then people, when they get the course, I have an optional one-on-one as well that you can do for like a one-time session, 1 hour session. And if someone goes through and does the exercises, then it's just helping clarify and interpret the data. Because I was just on a call with some of my mastermind members, and they're like, Mike, I went through the whole process, and at first I was overwhelmed because I had so much information about me. And then she's like, she did a one day session with me, and afterwards she's like, wow, she got so much clarity. And at the end of the day, clarity gives you confidence. It's like it precedes confidence, precedes courage, conviction. When I have more clarity, I have more conviction, I have more commitment, I rise up to another level. And so that's how important it is. I mean, Socrates himself said, to know thyself is the beginning of all wisdom. If you become a master of yourself, romantically, physically, like you're big in health and fitness as well, like, man, you can really know your path and how to communicate it, and just be comfortable in your own skin.
Absolutely. I think I read somewhere that you mentioned self-awareness is just so key to being an entrepreneur, really to lead yourself. So how do you, when you get off track, I don't know if you get burnt out. I think everybody does.
Oh
So I don't
yes.
think anybody's immune to it.
No.
What do you do to like reconnect, recenter, and just, get into more acceptance for the current state of your being?
Yeah, that's great. Great question. I love to get out in nature, walks, get a good workout in. That takes the edge off. And sometimes in a workout, I'm listening to sports talk, a sports podcast, something that has nothing to do with making me better. So I can just play, or I listen to this history one on Wondery, whatever, just something that is totally unwork related. And then great food, good wine, good cocktail. I even play a little Madden football occasionally on Xbox. Play with my daughter or kids. There's something about playing with kids.
Oh yeah.
Most adults, I think sometimes we're not comfortable just getting in their world. If you get down on your knees and you're just playing with them and goofy with them and connecting with them, it brings out your own spirit of play in a beautiful way.
I love that. That's great advice. Okay, so uh I always ask my guests one important question. If you were to leave a piece of advice with anybody that you feel needs to hear this today, what would it be?
I'd go with Socrates' quote. I can't improve it that much. To know thyself is the beginning of all wisdom. And then I would say, coupled with that, the world desperately needs your greatness. So if you know yourself, you can own yourself at a different level. And when you own yourself at a different level, you know how to put yourself in extraordinarily right positions. People who accomplish extraordinary things, they're people who put themselves in extraordinarily right positions, where their extraordinary talent met extraordinary opportunity, met extraordinary timing. And all of that, to some extent, can be predicted and created if you know what you're looking for. It doesn't happen easily and doesn't necessarily happen overnight, but it can be created.
Amazing. How empowering is that, right? That we have the ability to create the extraordinary results we want by becoming extraordinary and putting ourselves in extraordinary positions. And you are proof of that. And obviously, I imagine that you might have not always been that way, that you maybe didn't have that confidence to put yourself in this uncomfortable space of the unknown before you started your entrepreneurship journey. So I'm curious, how did you, from that position, if you could go back to yourself when you probably didn't feel as confident, how did you gain that confidence?
Man, a lot of it's trial and error. It's being comfortable failing. Like one of my favorite stories, Sarah Blakely, one of the world's most successful women. As a child, her dad used to ask her and her brother one thing at dinner: "What did you fail at today?" And so embracing, you know what, I have probably 4 times the amount of data about myself than the average entrepreneur has, because I've failed 4 times as much. I've tried 16 plus businesses. It's really more than that now. I've tried a lot of different things with intention. It wasn't just haphazard. It was intention. And now I can put myself in more and more and more right positions because of that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love Denzel Washington always says fail forward, fail
Mhm.
fast, fail forward, fail often. I think
Yeah.
that's what it is. Yeah, absolutely. Love it. Mike, this has been such an honor. Where could people best find you and possibly work with you? That would be amazing.
Yeah, my Instagram is the Mike Zeller or at the Mike Zeller. Also, if you want the 6 steps to finding your genius, I've got a free guide on that, and you can just text genius and then letter U to 474747, and you'll get that. And then also we'll have the link in the show notes, I imagine. And then you can get Genius Within on Amazon, or I have a free. You can get the book free. Just pay the shipping and handling at geniuswithinbook.com, thegeniuswithinbook.com, or geniuswithinbook.com, I believe it is. And that's, or mikezeller.com as well. So
Amazing.
excited.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mike, for your time. This has been so much fun, and I deeply appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Erica. So great to connect and serve.
Thank you.